Coming up on Network Africa. Celebration in the Congo Republic as incumbent president Denis Sassou wins re-election. An ultimatum given to the UN Refugee Agency from Kenya's government to close down one of the world's largest refugee camps. Plus, traffic jam of cargo vessels on Egypt's Suez Canal as a large container ship blocks the vital trading routes. Hello and welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Layo Adegoke. It's a celebration galore for the supporters of Congo Republic's incumbent president, Denis Sassou Nguesso, as he has been re-elected, extending his 36 years leading the Central African oil producer. Official results showed that with more than 88% of the vote, President Nguesso defeated his closest rival, Guy Brice Parfait Kolelas, who died hours after the polls closed. Kolelas received less than 8% of the vote. He was being evacuated to France to be treated for COVID-19 when he died. The main opposition party boycotted the vote, and two of his other main rivals were convicted of crimes after the last election in 2016. Mr. Sassou is a former paratrooper who took power in 1979. He lost Congo's first multi-party elections in 1992, but returned to office in 1997 after a civil war. Well, away from politics, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, EHRC, says Eritrean soldiers killed more than 100 civilians in the city of Aksum in Tigray at the end of November. Its investigation between the 27th February and 5th March followed reports of a massacre of over 2 days in November in the ancient city that's considered sacred by Ethiopia's Orthodox Christians. The state-linked commission said victims included residents of Aksum and pilgrims who went to mark the annual religious Aksum celebrations. Eritrean and Ethiopian troops were also accused of looting and destroying properties, including religious institutions and health facilities. EHRC is now calling for those who committed those rights violations to be held accountable. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's prime minister has acknowledged for the first time that troops from neighboring Eritrea have been in the Tigray region following the outbreak of conflict in November. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed told members of parliament that Eritrean forces came fearing they would be attacked by Tigray's regional fighters. Before this acknowledgement, for several months, both countries had denied that troops crossed the border. The conflict began after the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, captured military bases in the region. Hundreds of thousands of people have fled their homes in Tigray over the last 5 months. Now, despite the TPLF being ousted from power in Tigray at the end of November and Mr. Abiy declaring that the conflict was over, fighting still continues in parts of the region. Well, the Kenyan authorities have given the UN Refugee Agency a 14-day ultimatum to close one of the world's largest refugee camps. The government has threatened to forcibly repatriate Somali refugees living in Dadaab camp to the border if the deadline elapses. It also wants UNHCR to shut down the Kakuma camp in the northwest region. Kenya is citing national security threats posed by some of the refugees that it says are linked to the Somalia militant group Al-Shabaab. Dadaab was set up in 1991 to house families fleeing conflicts in Somalia, and some people have been living there for more than 20 years. Well, A Kenyan journalist, Cyrus Ombati, joins us now for more on this story. Thank you so much, Cyrus, for speaking to us. Let me begin by asking about the impact of this ultimatum on the refugees, with this order from the Kenyan government to the UN. What is the United Nations saying about the plight of the refugees, especially if the organization complies with this directive?
The order by the government that UNHCR comes up with a roadmap of repatriating these thousands of refugees from Kenyan side to any side they want has a huge impact from on all quarters that you may want to see. To start with the locals, this is a whole industry having a population of around 500,000 in a given place, then you want to move them once and for all. It has an impact on the workers who are working there, the security agencies who are working there, the refugees themselves. So it's not a small order that you may want to look at the way they want to see it, because they are saying the Kenyan government has given UNHCR 14 days to come up with a roadmap to repatriate these refugees. It's an issue that requires so much planning and execution that cannot be done within even a year. They can't meet the demands by the Kenyan government. So it's a tall order, in whatever way you want to look at it. It's not an easy issue to implement once and for all. We are waiting to see what will happen, but then I know it's a political issue that will want to be solved politically in the end.
Kenya is citing national security threats posed by some of the refugees that it says are linked to the Somalia militant group Al-Shabaab. What evidence does the government have to, back this?
You don't need evidence to show that some of the refugees or the camps have been used as a springboard for terrorism attacks in Kenya. In 2014, when we had an attack at the Westgate Mall here in Nairobi, it later emerged that one of the refugees who was involved in the attack came to Dadaab. Dadaab is in Garissa, near the Kenya-Somalia border. Then he was transferred to Kakuma, which is near the Kenya-Sudanese border. Then now he came to Nairobi by road. You see, now coming from the other side of South Sudan, it was easier for him to kind of erase detection. Then he came to Nairobi, where he planned the attack and executed the way he wanted. In 2015, when there was another attack at the Garissa University where we lost almost 200 students, another refugee was found to have been involved in this attack. He came to Dadaab as a refugee, where he planned the entire attack, coordinating with Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Then he executed the same. He also died in the attack. When it came to Dusit attack, again, which was Nairobi in 2019, a similar situation occurred, whereby one of the attackers was found to have come to Dadaab as a refugee. He posed as a refugee, but then he ended up in Nairobi, where he executed the mission he had. Police raided the refugee camp later on. They recovered around 12 guns and dozens of bullets. So to Kenya, these refugee camps have been used as a base for organizing these terror attacks on Kenyan soil. On that one, you can't argue with the Kenyan government, because they say they have a watertight evidence based on the 3 major attacks that have occurred in Nairobi.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Cyrus Ombati, Kenyan journalist. Thank you for your reporting. We'll move on to North Africa, where the rebel administration in eastern Libya has officially handed power to the country's new interim government based in Tripoli. The handover ceremony took place in Libya's second city, Benghazi, which had been the headquarters of the eastern administration. A new government of national unity, led by Prime Minister Abdul Deiba and backed by the UN, was sworn in last week in Tripoli to replace the 2 rival administrations which have been fighting for control of Libya. Meanwhile, in France, President Emmanuel Macron announced that Paris will next week reopen its embassy in Tripoli, which was closed in 2014 as violence spread in the country. Libya has been beset by violence since forces backed by NATO overthrew its leader, Muammar Gaddafi, in 2011. Dozens of vessels are stuck after a giant container ship became wedged across Egypt's Suez Canal, one of the world's busiest trade routes. Rescue boats are working to free the 400-meter-long vessel, which is said to have been knocked off course by strong winds. Officials fear that passage could remain blocked for days. Now, the incident has already created long tailbacks on the waterway, stopping dozens of other vessels from passing. About 12% of global trade passes through the Suez Canal, which connects the Mediterranean to the Red Sea and also provides the shortest sea link between Asia and Europe. Well, joining us now for more on this story is the VOA's correspondent in Egypt, Edward Yeranian. Thank you so much, Edward, for joining us.
My pleasure, Lio.
Well, what more can you tell us? What's the update at this time? How exactly did this obstruction happen?
Well, there was a sandstorm and a lot of wind, and the Arab media is suggesting that the ship was pushed off course by the wind and, as you could see from the videos, was jammed or wedged into the side of the canal. That being said, you never know. I mean, that's what's being reported. Many times, things that are reported are not necessarily true. But it was a fairly bad windstorm, at least here in Cairo. So I guess it's not surprising that they had a bad windstorm on the Suez Canal. It's not the first time they've had ships that sort of collided or blocked the canal. Since 2015, the canal was expanded to a two-directional waterway, or two different waterways. And so it's not fairly likely that the canal would be blocked for a long period of time, given the fact there's another waterway there to use as an alternate route. And also, most of the media has been reporting that the ship was moved. I say they're reporting, you can see from the video that they're putting out that the ship is no longer blocking that waterway. So I can't imagine that the canal itself will be blocked for too much longer, assuming it still is. I believe some ships are moving, at least according to the reports we've been seeing. And unless something else happens, it's likely that the situation will be resolved.
Well, we know the Suez Canal is an artery of international business and is providing an avenue for vessels to pass between Asia, the Middle East and Europe. Talk to us about the impact of this impediment.
Well, if it were to last for a long period of time, it could affect oil tankers, gas tankers, liquid natural gas tankers, and ultimately the supply of liquid natural gas or oil, and ultimately the price of either gas or oil, in addition to other commodities which pass through the canal. That being said, the canal has not been closed for a long period of time in recent memory. I think the last time was back in 1967 during the Arab-Israeli War. And I think that lasted up until the 1973 or 1975. So it was a very long period of time, which forced traffic that normally passed through the canal to go around the Cape of Good Hope, around the southern tip of Africa, which obviously is a much longer route, more expensive route. I don't think that's likely to happen again anytime soon, unless there's another war, God forbid.
Pray for war. Thank you so much, Edward Yeranian, VOA's correspondent in Cairo. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, Laya.
Still ahead on the program. Welcome back to the program. Nigeria LNG Limited, a global producer of liquefied natural gas, has signed a 5-year memorandum of understanding with 2 U.S. government development agencies to make Bonny Island malaria-free and achieve HIV epidemic control. Under the MOU, the United States, through the President's Malaria Initiative, will provide technical assistance to the NLNG-led Bonny Island Malaria Elimination Project. The partnership seeks to bring malaria deaths to zero in the community of 300,000 and make the island Nigeria's first malaria-free zone. The MOU also includes a partnership between NLNG and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention through the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief regarding support to the HIV/AIDS Surge Project that focuses on the control of HIV on Bonny Island. This partnership will improve HIV case finding, access to antiretroviral treatment, diagnosis, and preventive services for those affected by HIV on the island. As the world marks World Tuberculosis Day, the WHO says an estimated 1.5 million fewer people received care for the disease in 2020 than in 2019. According to preliminary data compiled by the World Health Organization from over 80 countries, as a reduction of 21% from 2019, the countries with the biggest relative gaps are Indonesia, South Africa, Philippines, and India. In 2020, WHO fears that over 500,000 more people may have died from TB simply because they were unable to obtain a diagnosis, partly because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has been severe, with an additional 1.4 million people estimated to be missing out on access to care in 2020. This takes the total of those who would have missed out on access to TB care in 2020 to over 4 million. Furthermore, an estimated 500,000 excess TB deaths could result due to drops in notifications, setting the world back a decade to the level of TB mortality in 2010. We need to build back stronger, learning lessons from the COVID-19 response to ensure more resilient health systems are in place and to advocate for rapid innovations such as vaccines, drugs, and diagnostics. TB vaccine is 100 years old. We can learn from the COVID response to ensure more effective vaccines that can truly drive down the epidemic. We have just 600 days to go to reach the 2022 global TB targets and keep the promises made at the UN high-level meeting on TB.
Well, despite being preventable and curable, tuberculosis remains one of the deadliest infectious diseases in the world. Amidst the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, on this World TB Day, African health workers are calling for more action to eliminate tuberculosis as a public health burden by 2030.
Despite being preventable and curable, tuberculosis is one of the deadliest infections in the world, killing 1.5 million people each year. 10 million people fall ill with tuberculosis each year as well, and many of them are children, almost 900,000, and most live in low and low-middle-income countries and some of the poorest countries in the world. It's also the leading killer of people with HIV. About a quarter of the world's population, roughly 1.7 billion people, are infected with TB, the latent form. However, this is not treated with preventive measures and therapies. It can become active and people will become sick and die as well. To make matters worse, COVID-19 has exacerbated the problem and set many national programs back in their efforts to respond to the TB pandemic in their countries.
Away from health matters, in South Africa, many Nigerians are on a very long waiting list to collect their passports after being processed for renewal. The problem is a lingering scarcity of passport booklets. The Nigerian Immigration Service has announced backlogs at all passport stations for the 32-page passports will be cleared in a week. Channels Television visited the Nigerian Consulate General in Johannesburg to see if anything has changed.
Wednesdays are usually passport collection days here at Nigeria's Consulate General in Johannesburg, while thousands have been captured or processed for their passports and many more still being captured. There are just no passport booklets, and it's been like that, leaving many on the waiting list, and it's been a frustrating journey for many Nigerians in the country, some of whom have to travel from far-flung provinces to get here to get one.
It has been a nightmare. December 30, 2020, I went to the OIS, which is the agency that captures your details, to pay, and they gave me a date of January 18, 2021. I have since gone there to capture. For 2 months, no communication at all. From the embassy, nothing. And there are so many people like me. People are frustrated, they're angry, they're disillusioned, they're really, really frustrated. It's so painful not to be able to get your passport, because a lot of people, their permits depend on it.
A statement from the Nigerian Immigration Service promised the backlog will be cleared in a week, but thousands have been affected in months of waiting.
Because of the COVID restrictions, people were not able to come up till the restrictions were lifted sometime in August or thereabout. Okay, as soon as that restrictions was lifted, we had a flurry of applicants coming in at the same time. So the request was enormous. I think that contributed to the large number of requests that we've had between that time and now. We are unable to meet up with, the request for passports, especially because of the shortage of booklets coming from headquarters.
Things seem to be changing rather slowly, as only 500 passport booklets were received at the consulate on Tuesday. The reality is that over 3,000 people are waiting and more are still being processed. The consulate has opted to attend to them in organized batches. Some of those fortunately in the first batch spoke to us.
Finally, since November last year that I captured, see when I collected it today, March, 24th of March.
I cannot explain my joy having collected this passport today. I applied for this passport since October last year. It's actually denied me from traveling during this Xmas.
And they need to improve in their communication, in terms of because the communication is not, suitable with a lot of people.
The shortage is not limited to this place, but you can also see that we are faring better than some other missions around the world among those foreign-based passport stations. This is because we have also always received consideration from headquarters in Abuja, because we have impressed upon them the fact that we cover the equivalence of about 9 countries because of the vast nature of the SADC region and the fact that we have a large number of Nigerians living in this place.
Meanwhile, as the rest of the thousands await the call for collection, there are also about 500 uncollected Nigerian passports at the mission since last year. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
And that's it on the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.